the NPA is saying that if you do not have a national ID card, or the Ghana card as we call it, then it means that when the cylinder recirculation program starts sometime later in the year, around September, then you will not be able to have gas or LPG or cylinder. You can't exchange your cylinder with a failed one as the program seeks to do. That is quite an interesting one. Let's speak to the National Petroleum Authority's communications manager, Mohammed Abdul-Kudus, to help us appreciate this better. Hello, good evening, Mohammed. Welcome to Eyewitness News.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me on your program.
Yes. What's this we're hearing, at least from your quarters, that if you do not have an ID card, a national ID or a Ghana card or any other acceptable ID card, then you cannot be part of the cylinder recirculation program. Is that really the case?
Oh, obviously not at all. Not at all. It was actually said, among other things, as part of the processes to the implementation. Currently, what pertains to the system is that individual or households own cylinders. You take your cylinder to the fuel station, then you go and fill it and go back to your place and you use it. Cylinder recirculation is changing ownership and maintenance of cylinder from the household to the bottling companies. So when cylinder recirculation comes on board, individual or household would not own cylinders anymore. So the bottling companies would have that responsibility of procuring the cylinders and put them in the system for use. How do you ensure the successful implementation of it? That is where there is going to be a registration process of individual or household who would actually be part of the program. So what it means is that there would be at a point, call it an exchange point, where you are supposed to go take your empty cylinder in exchange for a filled cylinder. We are asking that as part of the process, there would be a registration. And to register means to come with a valid ID card. Then example was given of the national ID that we have. It doesn't mean that any other ID cannot be used. Even on that same day, my deputy chief executive, after he cited the example of the ID card, a media person followed up with a question whether it is going to be the only form of identification. And he said no. Anything acceptable within that particular circumstance would actually be used. And we know that there are other IDs beside the national ID that we have. But you and I would agree that we're all trying as much as possible to drive towards the usage of it because of the features that it brings, probably even in the issue of identification and tracing of people. Because like I said, the cylinder would not be owned by the individual. The cylinder would be owned by the company. So you should have a certain system that allows easy tracing, easy tracking of which cylinder is with who, if for nothing at all, even for data collection purposes. So he did not actually make it the end all or be all in the form of ID that you needed to use. He only mentioned that. And like I said, in the follow-up to a question from the media person, he clarified and said that that is not going to be the only form of identification to participate in the cylinder recirculation model at all.
I see. So whose registration or ID card will be required? Is it the leader of the household or the one picking up the filled cylinder?
So obviously the head of household. It's just for purposes of tracking and identification of who has what and who has taken what to where. So the household would have a representative. Once the identification is made, anytime somebody, even if it is a delegate out of the household who goes to, is it a matter of mentioning who you are, where you are coming from, and then the record is actually assessed, and then you put in your empty cylinder and be able to take back a filled cylinder back to your place and continue with it. So that particular narrative or story out there that the issue has to do with Ghana card and nothing else is absolutely not true.
So it doesn't matter that maybe I register in Accra, I move, because I have a short thing to do somewhere else, I move there. When I get there, I just have to mention my name and show that I'm registered on the cylinder recirculation program, and I will get a new cylinder, or I'll pick up a filled cylinder, take it home, use it, and bring it back. Is that correct?
So the purposes for the cylinder is for either your domestic or commercial purposes.
Yeah. So for example, I'm in Accra, but I have a short thing to do. I have a short thing to do somewhere around Kaswa. I'll be there for maybe a month or two. So I'm living there for a month or two. Even though I've registered in Accra, what happens to me when I go there and I want to cook? Must I register again, or my registration already done in Accra will suffice for that purpose?
Also, the registration is to the point that you are having that dealing with. If your location changes at any point in time, where you change it to, you ought to be identified at that particular place, so you can still be traced of whatever that you take and for what purposes that you engage in. So let's assume that I am in Accra, I relocate to Tamale, even if it is going to be for 2 or 3 months, that will require the use of the system. It's just to go back to a certain listing point and to register as well with the place. So the record continues to exist, and you can always be traced. And there will be the evidence that you were probably in Kama and you have relocated to Tamale, even if it was to be for temporary purposes. The registration is still required.
I see. That's quite laudable, but I'm wondering what the feasibility of that will be, because the points, or the exchange points, I call them, should have up to date data on the people in the area, or people who patronize or use that point. So how is it going to be like? Is it going to be a soft copy? Is it going to be written in book? And so when I come, they have to go through the book line by line to see if they'll see my name, if it's going to be digital. What happens to hard to reach areas where connectivity and things like that becomes a problem?
Well, the form of registration has actually not been concluded on. And so whatever that is feasible within the given location can actually be used. It is something that actually allows a digitalization, or where you can use the PC. Fair enough. It is about using a ledger book just so that you keep record of the people within the area. Fair enough. Fortunately or unfortunately, the penetration of gas is not that huge, because the data suggests, as we speak, that out of every 10, you are having about 3 people, using LPG as an alternate fuel for cooking. So what it means is that the penetration is not so high there. And even with that, the concentration is more in the south, than the rest of the regions, right down from Bono through to Ahafo, through to Savannah, then the regions of the north. The concentration is not that much there. So the record keeping should not come with any difficulty at all. Because like I said, the numbers who are currently using it, and that's the purpose for which cylinder recirculation is even actually being pushed strongly, so that the safety that it comes with, if we're able to get many more to be using LPG, one, will save our environment, and two, we are able to guarantee the kind of safety that we want. So it is absolutely not an issue at all that the record keeping would be difficult. And like I said, it is not a cast in iron that you ought to do it electronically or to do it manually. Whatever that is allowed and feasible at that particular point in time, it can be done. So it could even be a book that the Eastern Point has kept to keep records of the customers that he or she is dealing with as an Eastern Point.
I see. So now what happens? People buy gas, so for example, I have a 14 kilogram cylinder, but I'm not able to fill it. So I will buy like 5 kilograms. It happens every time when you go to the filling stations. And so with this program, the cylinder recirculation, where the cylinders will be pre-filled, I go there, pay, and just pick one. What happens to people who are unable to fill their cylinders? It could be 5 kilos, but they buy 2 kilos, or they fill it half, or they just fill what they have. What's any provision for those people? Because I'm presuming that the cylinders, as delivered at the discharge points or the filling stations, would have been fully filled. So when you pay the full amount and you carry the cylinder away. Do you have any room for people who are unable to pay for the entire, filling of the of the cylinders?
So obviously, this is something that has actually come up at several of our interactions with the stakeholders, and we've actually taken that on board. Because one thing that is critical to all of this is the availability of the cylinders in all sizes that are required in the, by the market. Currently, what is more predominant has to do with the 3 kg, 6 kg, 14 kg, and probably 17 kg. Those are the predominant ones. So like you asked the question, is supposing somebody wants 4 kg or a quantity that should be of 4 kg, yet 4 kg is not in the system. That discussion is actually still ongoing. And with the rolling out of the cylinder recirculation model, depending on the market size, it probably would reorientate the very manufacturing companies to look again at the very type of cylinder that they put out in the market. So if many are gravitating towards a certain a kilogram, the likelihood is going to be that more of these cylinder manufacturing companies will produce more of that. And so it certainly would have a way of solving itself as we start the program and roll it. It is not something that we're just going to start and then we foreclose everything that is pertaining now. We intend to do a phase out of the existing structure and system that we have, where you take your cylinder to a filling station and fill. When the program starts out, we are intended to run side by side with them, give them a certain transitional period, hoping by that time that whatever challenge that would have been identified of the system, measures are put in place to correct them. Then you can probably phase out the current system. But they are not going to go out completely, hopefully by close of September when we start the phase rollout. And let me actually state is that the phase rollout is starting with Greater Accra and Greater Kumasi. Why? Because critical infrastructure that is needed for the successful implementation has to do with the availability of bottling plants. Currently, we have only 4 bottling plants in the country. 3 are in Greater Accra, 1 in Ashanti. And so that is why we are going to start it in a phase-by-phase basis, depending and hoping on the availability of the bottling plants across the country. So whatever we'll be doing and whatever regulation that is supposed to come with it would be existing for now for Greater Accra and then Greater Kumasi. And like I said, as we identify the challenges and roll on, we'll be putting in mechanisms and measures that would address them.
I see. So what happens then to the cylinders we have or the cylinders we own ourselves now? So I have a cylinder at home. I'm sure you do too. When this new program starts, what happens to these cylinders? Do we discard them because we will be getting new ones? What happens? Or we go and exchange them for the new ones?
Okay, so there would be an evaluation of the state of your cylinder. For many people, the 3-cylinder as though is an object of inheritance, which is handed over from one generation to the other. But cylinders have expiry dates. Okay, so depending on the quality and suitability of your cylinder, we could make a judgment out of that, whether to determine it as something that is outmoded and you need to discard it, or something that can be put back into the system and refurbished for you. And then the system continues. But like I said, the system with cylinder recirculation moves or transfers ownership of cylinder from the household to the bottling plant. So the bottling plants would now be owning the cylinders and they would be responsible for maintaining and refurbishing them as and when the need arises. So the cylinder that you have at the beginning of the start of the program, when you come and register with an exchange point, the determination would be done of your cylinder and then the conclusion would be arrived at. Where your cylinder is fairly new, then there could be a certain discussion. I really need to also put this thing out that there is a fine-tuning that is expected to be done on this particular one that has not been arrived at and communicated to me as a communication person so I can tell the public.
Very well.
Because I speak to the information that I'm fed with from the various technical department responsible.
I appreciate that.
Yes,
I
the assessment
very
of
well.
all cylinders before the 18 starts. Yeah.
I appreciate that. So, is there are we to make any financial commitment towards these new cylinders we will be getting, or that will be built into the pricing of the LPG?
Okay, so the briefing I have once again has to do with, because that money, that ownership now moves from the individual or the household to the bottling plant. There is a conversation of a margin on the build up that caters for it, because we all agree that there's no free lunch anywhere at all.
All right.
There would be a certain margin in the build up, but that has actually not also been arrived at or communicated to me, so I probably will not be able to speak with it.
Very well.
With the National Authority.
Very well, Mohammed Kudus, we are grateful. We are very grateful. But the main point is that once you register, you will have access to the cylinders, whether you present with a Ghana card or not. What is important, you just have to register, and then you have access.
Valid registration document here.
Very well.
Valid registration document.
As always, so grateful for your time, Mohammed Abdul-Kudus, Communications Manager for the National Petroleum Authority, speaking to us on the new program they're about to roll out called the Cylinder Recirculation Program.